The government isn't even turned back on yet. We thought we had a deal, and before that can even happen, and it could happen later today, Epstein files again resurfaces. I think Trump wants that to go away worse than anything, but every time we turn around, something happens. And now, courtesy of the Democratic Party, apparently they have resurfaced again. And now then there are claims through some leaked emails that purportedly imply that President Trump did know about a lot of illegal activities and either didn't do anything about it or possibly may have even been implicated in them. It's really unclear what a lot of this means, and that's one of the reasons we are really grateful to have constitutional attorney Robert Barnes on today, who has been with us before and has a lot of good things to say on some of this stuff and is very knowledgeable about and can maybe help us interpret what these emails actually say or what they don't say and what a court of law may think about some of them. First of all, Robert, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Well, listen, this is a pretty explosive moment here. The internet's just blowing up with this stuff, and we've got a lot of angry comments from the White House. We've got a lot of accusations coming in from the Democratic Party. But let's actually jump right into this. And Gary, let me put it up there so if people haven't seen what these claims actually are, here's the first one here. It says in April 2nd of 2011, email from Epstein to Maxwell, quote, "I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump." And then the redacted name of one of the victims spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned, police chief, etc. I'm 75% there. Maxwell apparently responded that same day. I've been thinking about that. What do you understand about what we're even seeing here? But now these are supposed to be released by some of the Democratic people that they say they have these emails. A lot of these are from author Michael Wolff, who had been doing a lot of research on Jeffrey Epstein for a long time about doing a book. What do you make of these things?
Just looking at it in isolation, they don't really tell us a whole bunch because there's a lot of different possible interpretations of it. And so it's more in the broader context of who Epstein was that certain specific meanings can be implied connected to it. All of this is because Trump made a disastrous decision to not release the Epstein files after his campaign promised to do so throughout the 2024 campaign, and particularly his allies like FBI Director Kash Patel, FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino, Attorney General Pam Bondi, all promised to release him. Trump himself said he didn't have a problem releasing him as long as innocent people weren't wrongfully implicated. And Trump himself raised Epstein as an issue politically in 2016, knowing it was a vulnerability of the Clintons. So most people believe that it's hard to imagine there's anything truly incriminating on Trump as to Epstein. Otherwise, why would Trump have been the one to originate and instigate so much discussion, talk of campaign on releasing the files, all the rest? It wouldn't make sense if he had any reason to believe he had done anything wrong or illicit. In the same capacity, the other reason why most people are skeptical that this leads anywhere beyond innuendo is that if the Democrats had this information on Trump in their files all the way back, why in the world would they not disclose it? I mean, they tried to impeached him twice, tried to remove him twice, indicted him 4 times, tried to assassinate him twice in terms of his opponents and adversaries, tried to bankrupt him 3 times. Hard to imagine that they would have sat on any explosive files. I think the more likely consequence is that somebody lied to Trump about how his name is littered throughout the file, and that the files had been doctored Russiagate style to implicate him, and that led him to panic and repress it. I think the real reason behind the scenes is that Epstein implicates Israel. While Democrats are releasing this, they have not been highlighting what other groups, DropSite and others, have been disclosing, which was Epstein was an ongoing Israeli operative going back decades, and even as of just a year or two before his death. He was the middleman. For those that don't know the broader story of Jeffrey Epstein, he starts out in this whole scene when he's hired by Bill Barr's father, Donald Barr, the headman who had long-standing OSS CIA ties, who became the headmaster at the Dalton School, a school for the privileged and elite. Anthony Blinken, went there. A bunch of high power people went there. Epstein gets hired out of the blue, even though he doesn't have a college degree. Donald Barr leaves that next year, starts writing science fiction books that have as a paradise a place for older men to abuse younger girls. You couldn't have penned this with like a bad AI. And then he gets into trouble for hitting on young girls there. That leads to a job on Wall Street, which nobody understood how he got that job, connected to some wealthy and powerful people. From there, he shows up connected to some of the biggest arms runners, gun traffickers, human traffickers, information launderers, intel operatives. He shows up in Iran-Contra. He shows up with various Ponzi schemers that are tied to this. He appears to be a major money launderer, gun trafficker, intel deep source between the U.S., MI6, and Israel. And the person who appears to have helped recruited him into all of this and promote him starts with Donald Barr, then it goes to Wall Street, but then it gets all the way up to Robert Maxwell. That's how he gets connected to Ghislaine Maxwell, Robert Maxwell's daughter. Robert Maxwell, also famous for being an intel and information, a money launderer, a crook, and all of that, but also a major information launderer for the intelligence agencies, including MI6, KGB, the Stasi, and Mossad, and CIA. He helped corrupt the Israeli intelligence into the United States to steal military secrets using his relationship with then Senator John Tower, who almost became Secretary of Defense, you may remember. But the problem was he was a drunk and liked to chase young girls around. Epstein that's the real deep crimes. Like, people focus on his personal perversions, his desire to abuse underage and young girls, but that was almost a sideshow. The honeypot is almost a distraction from how deep his criminality goes. And the government he implicates more than any other is Israel. And I think that's why they've covered it up more than any other reason and misled Trump into believing his name is all over the place. Democrats will use that against him because he didn't disclose the files, when I think it's all about covering up the criminality, the degree of criminality of Israel connected to Jeffrey Epstein.
And I want to zero in on some of for the moment, because we're going to hit on some of the issues you just mentioned there in a second. I want to take a look at that second email, Gary, if you could bring that one up, because I specifically want to know from an attorney's point of view, what does this actually say or not say? It says Republicans and Democrats on the Oversight Committee have been releasing some of the materials turned over by Epstein's estate, including that 2003 birthday book, etc. In January 2019, email released Wednesday, Epstein wrote to Wolf, that's the author who was doing research on a book that was supposed to have been written. He said, quote, Trump said he asked me to resign. Never a member ever. One assumes that he might have been talking about Mar-a-Lago, but we don't know for sure. He continues, of course, he knew about the girls and he asked Ghislaine to stop. So now you can imply a bunch of stuff about that, but as a lawyer, what does that say or will not say to you?
I think the context here is that Trump was one of the first people to cut ties with Epstein even before Epstein got indicted. Unlike Bill Gates, who continued to be his pal after he was indicted, unlike the Israeli leaders and former prime ministers and defense intelligence officials who stayed in touch and stayed at Epstein's house after he got indicted. A few years before, Trump removed Epstein. Now, Epstein's claiming he was never a member of Mar-a-Lago. Trump barred him from Mar-a-Lago. And the reason related to, as Trump himself has disclosed, one of the people, including Virginia Roberts-Giuffre, who's probably the person identified in that prior email, was working at Mar-a-Lago. And Epstein recruited her through Ghislaine Maxwell to work for him instead. And Trump said he complained about that. So I assume that's what that email references and it deals with. It's possible that he's trying to say something broader, but that would be unlike Epstein at that point, because Epstein, of course, has never admitted any of this. So the idea that he would be telling Michael Wolff, of all people, oh, yeah, I was abusing young girls all the time, and Trump, that's not likely. More likely he's referencing, I was recruiting employees from Mar-a-Lago. Trump got ticked off about it, told Ghislaine Maxwell to stop recruiting his employees, and Trump himself has gone on record saying this. So I think this particular email is much ado over nothing. But all of it is because Trump made the catastrophic mistake, self-sabotage mistake, of not disclosing all the Epstein files. Even if the files were totally doctored, just let them all out. Otherwise, they're going to, you're going to suffer death by 1,000 cuts. And that's what that's what's happening to Trump. Some of us warned that would happen, but he has so many incompetent rubes around him, like counterfeit cash and Dan Ballas Bongino and pay for play Pam Bondi and Todd Useless Blanche, that they're the ones who delivered this scandal right on his plate. And it's going to keep getting worse. There's going to be more and more and more, and a little bit, 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 all because, I mean, they're about to vote in the House. Once they swear in the last Congresswoman in, Thomas Massey's petition to disclose the Epstein files is going to go to the House floor, is likely to pass the House. The Senate might try to stall and delay it, but they're going to be humiliated by being anywhere near covering up the Epstein files. So how long Trump can actually effectively block this is in doubt anyway. They should just get ahead of this. Just dump it all. Just dump it all. Let it all out there. Let people make their own decisions, own judgments, their own calls. And I have no doubt the people screaming at Trump not to let it out isn't because of things that are related to Trump. It's because of things that expose Israel. I mean, what would happen if the American people fully appreciated that Mossad and the CIA were willing to treat young American girls in such a horrendous way, to abuse them as if they're cattle, in order to prop up a U.S.-Israel relationship and Israel's foreign policies around the world? Given where Israel is right now, politically in the U.S., already way underwater, it could be a death nail. And that's why Miriam Adelson is screaming at him not to disclose it. That's why Miriam Adelson is spending $20 million to try to take out the lead congressman trying to expose it, Thomas Massey out of Covington, Kentucky. So Trump should just accept it and release it all, but it looks like he'll continue to double down on being dumb. And that's going to continue to have this, death by 1,000 cuts. And lots of people will now believe he is implicated in the files because of how he has handled the disclosure.
Well, and that's where I wanted to go next. This is a Wall Street Journal from July the 8th, where with broken promises on Epstein, Pam Bondi draws the ire of Trump's supporters. And, because she had famously made that statement on Fox News early in the administration, shortly after she had taken over, the list is on my desk and I have all this stuff and we're going to release it. And wow, everybody's ready for it. And then here by July, it never came. Nobody's ever explained to the supporters I'm talking about why it is. So they're upset about that. Well, now then, just a couple of weeks later, on I believe it's the 23rd of July, the Wall Street Journal now reports the Justice Department told Trump in May that his name is among many in the Epstein files, and they're worried about releasing it. What do you make of this part so far?
So I think when they came in, the Bondi, Bongino, Patel, Blanche really didn't understand what the Epstein case was about. They thought it implicated a few high-ranking Democrats and a little bit of sexual perversion, not a 40-year honeypot operation that was a continuation of what Robert Maxwell was doing on behalf of intel services across the world, in particular Israel, but not limited to Israel. And I don't think they ever understood this is going to implicate the CIA. This is going to implicate high-ranking, very powerful American institutions and individuals. It's going to implicate MI6. It's going to implicate Mossad. And it's going to implicate powerful Israeli officials and connected parties. It's going to show a modus operandi that would shock and horrify the ordinary person across the Western world. And once they discovered that, they decided they had to suppress it. And their pretext to Trump to suppress it was to say, oh, your name is all over the file. Even though there's aspects of that would not surprise Trump, in that he knew Epstein. Epstein was at Mar-a-Lago. He was in the same social circle as Epstein. Epstein gave him flights from New Jersey down to Miami and Palm Springs. So it's always struck me as weird that Trump reacted the way he did, given that Trump was the guy to out Epstein from the all the way back to 03, 04. He was outing Epstein connected to the British royal family on British TV in 2015. So it never made sense that bothered him. So they must have convinced him, is my take, that the file's been Russiagated. In other words, wrongfully accused him of doing things he didn't do, wrongfully connected him to some of the scandals, when the real goal, the real objective, is to cover up for Israel's corruption. Bondi's a huge Israel person, Israel hawk. So is Bongino. He's busy suing people on libel for anybody saying his girlfriend has any connections to Israel. Like Elijah Schaefer, and it doesn't matter who it is. You can be a small-time podcaster, and the FBI director is making sure his girlfriend sues you if you talk about potential Israel connections. The Bongino is so deferential to Israel. He said it was almost like a religious experience when he got to go to Israel. So these guys are a little nuts on that topic anyway. But I think that's what's lurking behind all this, and they just think they can cover it up. And all it's doing is hurting Trump badly. Constantly, not only because of the Israel lobby problem, but also because it makes him look like he is friends. I mean, you got South Park making it look like he and Epstein were in on all the criminal honeypot operations and the underage girl abuse operations. And we said at the time this was going to happen. And they just didn't listen. And they just like, no, we'll just pretend it doesn't exist. Pretend it doesn't exist. Pretend it doesn't exist. And that's it. You're going to get story after one after another. And the Democrats take back the House. They'll hold huge hearings that will just blame Trump for Epstein. So he needs to get ahead of the curve now and needs to unload that information and let the American people decide what's relevant and significant and consequential in those files. Like what Tulsi Gabbard did. What I've told the administration, give it to Tulsi Gabbard. Gabbard's already been able to de-Russiagate the Russiagate files and expose the other criminality. Let her put together who it implicates and connects. It's a variation of the Kennedy assassination and the King assassination. It's all about deep state corruption of our society, including whether it's assassinations, honeypots, blackmail, money laundering, arms running, whatever it is. Just expose it all and let Tulsi Gabbard take the lead on it. And Miriam Adelson can just cry her way back to Israel where she was born. That's what needs to happen.
So now one thing that could put a crimp in that is one other claim by Michael Wolff, in that not in emails, but in his conversation with Jeffrey Epstein before his death. We'll just say whether it was his murder or suicide is yet to be determined conclusively, in my view. But whatever, before he died, he said this, and this was actually a video he recorded earlier this year, I think in January. Where he claims that he was shown photographs by Epstein that include Trump. Watch this.
Epstein documents coming from the White House. This is because the last dump of a few weeks ago was so disappointing. But these new documents are supposed to be unredacted, air quotes. But I'm going to tell you what should be among those documents. In 2014, when I started to interview Epstein about a book, he would bring out a collection of pictures involving his longtime bestie, Donald Trump. There were about a dozen of these pictures, and I had seen them on 2 occasions. And what I remember from these pictures quite specifically are 2 in which he's surrounded by young women, topless young women. I can't say how old they were, but they were young women. In one of them, there's 2 girls sitting on his lap, each on one knee. And in another picture, he has a telltale sign on the front of his pants, and there are 4 or 5 girls who are pointing at it and laughing. Now, these pictures were kept in Epstein's safe, and that's the same safe that the FBI raided and took everything from after Epstein was arrested. So they ought to be there. I guess we will.
That's good enough right there, Gary. So the implication being that Trump was doing underage girls, etc. Now, even in that statement that Wolff himself claims, he says, I don't know how old they were. They just looked young. So for all I know, they may not have been that young. What can, if anything, can you draw from those claims?
The reason I'm skeptical of those kind of photos, Wolff is busy, by the way, suing Melania Trump in the hopes that she doesn't sue him for libel related to some things he said. He has a unique theory about how he can get ahead of that. And Wolff's always, has been a long time anti-Trumper. So there's that aspect to filter through his interpretation. But my general view is, if those photos were seized, the person who's been in control of that photo file from 2021 to 2024 was the Biden administration and Maureen Comey. Does anybody think they wouldn't have disclosed that and leaked it? That's the problem. That's the hard problem I have with that part of the story. It's like I have to believe Democrats decided to sit on a guy they were desperate to prevent from running from office. They chose not to scandalize with Epstein files that were in their possession and custody and the leading personnel. That's what makes me very dubious. Find Wolf's story very dubious in that regard. If there was anything truly scandalous in the information, and definitely photos like that would have absolutely leaked. So that's why I'm skeptical of his story. Now, what it also goes to is the people that keep saying Epstein wasn't running a honeypot blackmail operation. Even if such photos existed of anybody, Trump or otherwise, why does he have those photos? Why is he keeping those photos? Why is he putting them in a safe? I'm being told that he had nothing. There was no honeypot operation. That it's all exaggerated. Michael Tracy's running around saying it's all exaggerated. Not really a big deal. Well, then why is he doing these kind of things? I mean, like the email communications between he and Ghislaine Maxwell, we start off at the beginning, sure sounds like Trump, like he was trying to set people up to blackmail him. Like he was trying to set people up. The thing is, if Trump was susceptible to blackmail, he would have already been blackmailed. If he was susceptible to all this, then, so that's reason for my skepticism on it. The flip side is more and more people are going to draw the worst possible connections because of two things. One, Trump's complete reversal and sudden suppression of the Epstein files and putting out a fabricated fictional story about how there is no Epstein list and there are no names and nothing else. These kind of stories rebut that. The other part is it's the signal of all of his turn and change. And it was before the Epstein reversal, we're getting withdrawal from Ukraine. We're getting ceasefires with Gaza. We're getting peace deals with Iran. We're getting negotiations with Venezuela. We're getting all of these things before the Epstein file reversal. Once we get the Epstein file reversal, all of a sudden it's escalation with Russia, escalation with Iran, escalation with Venezuela. All of a sudden he's starting to do the deep state's bidding. And so people are going to think that there's going to be a wide range of opinion that Epstein files, there is something in there on Trump and that they're now blackmailing him with it. And that's why he's trying to hide it. And that's why he made these sudden reversals from his campaign promises. Personally, I don't think that's the case, but I can see why people will draw that connection, not only because of the time and correlation, but also because of the sudden radical policy reversals from his own campaign promises at the exact same time that all of a sudden these files go from being fully disclosed to being completely suppressed.
And now then, what's going to happen now in terms of the trying to control the narrative, which, as you pointed out, has been far from successful. If this discharge petition actually works, they get the 218 votes. What is that going to result in? Do you understand how this process is even going to work?
Yeah, so if they get the discharge petition and it passes the House to disclose, because first it's to a vote on it, and then assuming that vote goes through, then there's a certain protocol that the House and certain committee members of the House have to force disclosure of the Epstein files. And then the House can then disclose to the House. And then the House can decide what gets disclosed to the country. In my view, they should just use this as an opportunity. We're in a dead period anyway, about to enter the holidays, a year away from the next election. Now's the time to get ahead of all this. Just dump it all. Just dump it. Get it out there. There's going to be interesting leads because if they really put it out there, Bill Gates is going to be heavily implicated. Bill Clinton is going to be heavily implicated. The people, Wexner is going to be heavily implicated. A bunch of high-ranking, high-profile Democrats are going to be implicated. Now, so will the Israeli government, but that's even more excuse and cover for Trump to cut bait and divorce from Bibi's policies in Israel that are causing him such political trouble here at home anyway. So that's what they need to do, because if they don't do it, then it goes to the House and Democrats will selectively leak it. They'll selectively leak a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. It'll be cut. And they won't be leaking the Clinton files. They won't be leaking the Bill Gates files. They won't be leaking even the Israeli files. It'll just be linking Trump file, maybe throw in a little Howard Lutnick in there, who's Jeffrey Epstein's neighbor. Those kind of people. It will be a disaster for him. It will be a nightmare for him. So either he gets ahead of this or he suffers a death by 1,000 cuts. It's going to be up to Trump.
Now, let's look at a different aspect of that. You said earlier that there was an issue not just with the Israeli Mossad and several other aspects of the Israeli government, but also with the working of the CIA. Seems like they may have as much interest as anyone in keeping these things out because they don't want their activities out in the open. What would happen if we do find out, the American public, that the CIA has been doing things that we consider abhorrent?
I think you'll see a reaction like you saw in the late 1970s when they found out about MK Ultra, when they found out about Operation Phoenix, when they found out that the CIA was neck deep in drug running, gun running, human trafficking, psychological experimentations, illegal assassinations, regime change. That, people like James Baker never forgave Bill Colby for disclosing the family jewels. He blamed 9/11 on Bill Colby. Now, of course, by the way, Bill Colby's grandson is Eldridge Colby, currently Under Secretary of Defense. So the other people who basically blacklisted his grandfather, they were named Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, and George H.W. Bush. So we'll see if the grandson remembers some of that. But what they should do is use this as an opportunity to expose deep state corruption, put Tulsi Gabbard in charge because he's the best at it, knowing how to filter that through, has the confidence of all sides. And then they could mitigate the harm and direct the harm. We need to rein in the CIA, we need to rein in the NSA, we need to rein in our relationship with MI6, rein in our relationship with Mossad. But you're right, Ratcliffe is busy. He's recycling and laundering MI6 and Ukrainian intel as our intel. That's why our president is given constantly fake information on the Ukrainian conflict. Same with Iran and Israel. He just takes Mossad's bogus intel, recycles it, launders it as his own. Right now on the CIA staff is the person who, according to credible complaints, is the January 6th pipe bomber, who was apparently working at DC, at the Capitol Police with the Capitol. Apparently he's involved in all kinds of things that happened January 6th, but including putting those fake pipe bombs that are meant to scare everybody. And then she ends up at the CIA like a year or so later. Why is she even still on Ratcliffe's payroll? So there's no question that Ratcliffe and the institutional actors of the CIA and the NSA just do not want the world to know just how corrupt they are, just how nasty they are. That's personified in the form of Jeffrey Epstein and all the bad stuff he did. That's why, as even Acosta, the former prosecutor in the case, and Trump labor secretary, purportedly admitted that he was told to back off because Epstein was an intelligence asset. There's files that suggest that in Robert Mueller's files, who's involved in this. So Epstein was always the key to unraveling deep state corruption and getting public buy-in for massive institutional reform. But that's precisely why those institutions don't want anybody to understand and know who he is. And they don't care if Trump suffers death by 1,000 cuts, as long as it's not them getting exposed.
Well, it's really started to look like whatever Trump is or isn't involved with may even be a sideshow compared to a lot bigger things that we would like to know in these Epstein files. And maybe we don't even know what we're asking for, but at least I, for one, am like, bring the spotlights out, shine on all of this stuff. However ugly it is, I think it would be better for the country if all of it came out and we can deal with it, as opposed to like just letting some come out and keep the rest hidden, because I think this is not good for our country.
Not at all. For people to understand, Epstein basically replaced Mark Rich for Israel. After Mark Rich got into trouble with tax and other issues, he was kind of the arms runner, money launderer, info launderer guy. Epstein replaced him and Robert Maxwell. And consequently, like you're seeing in some of the drop site disclosures, it's interesting. Democrats aren't disclosing this information. Instead, they disclose anytime Trump's name pops up. But what's more interesting to me was his ongoing role. Like just a few years ago, he's the intermediary between Israel and Russia, the intermediary between Israel and the Ivory Coast. Jeffrey Epstein, right? This guy with unexplained money sources who suddenly became a billionaire overnight, who supposedly is a trader but never traded that anybody knows about. At least not on the public stock markets. He might have been trading something, but it wasn't what was supposed to be traded on Wall Street. So you dig in, this guy exposes all the crimes of the deep state. He personifies it in its scale and scope of evil, but he also personifies it and manifests it in its everyday banality of evil, in the arms running, the information laundering, the kind of trading of people and places for power that is constantly being engaged in by these corrupt rogue agencies that have lost any sense of moral compass or any degree of anchor in constitutional republic principles. So I agree absolutely. I am for full, complete disclosure of everything related to the Epstein files, because it will trigger more public outcry and demand for radical reform in Washington, like we should have got at the end of the 1970s. That should have killed the CIA once and for all. And instead, they resurrected themselves into a new life. Epstein could be the death nail to the CIA's ongoing criminality. And that's why so many powerful actors in Washington will do anything possible to keep the real Epstein files hidden.
Well, then all we can do is hope that President Trump does what you suggest and don't even wait for the discharge petition. Just say, here's a bulldozer. I'm just going to unload all of it from the files and make with it what you will. That would probably be the best thing. Listen, before I let you go, I wonder if you suggested or talked about something a second ago. I wonder if you can kind of tell us what is your understanding of this whole issue about the pipe bomb and the CIA person and how it related to January 6th. Because we've heard about a lot of these accusations, but so far, at least I haven't seen anybody has been arrested yet. What can you tell us about that?
So from the get-go, everything about January 6th smelled like a false flag. For those people that don't misunderstand false flags, not that an event did not happen. False flag literally derived from when a pirate ship would put up a false flag pretending to be a ally of the ship they're about to attack, so that the ship that they're about to attack doesn't recognize them as a risk. And then once they get close enough to be able to board the ship, up goes the Jolly Roger, hence false flag attacks. So here, everything about January 6th was unusual from the get-go. Unusual security lapses, unusual missing evidence, role of informants, infiltrators and instigators, hundreds of undercover assets of the FBI that has now been admitted and acknowledged. They're on the ground trying to inspire the violence. But a big part of the story that has never been explained is in the night before, somebody went around and planted pipe bombs, including at the DNC and elsewhere. And what was extraordinary is this person was never found, never caught. And this was the story meant to raise the stakes. Hey, this wasn't just a public riot at the Capitol. This was an insurrection that was meant to overthrow the government. And, it was the great imminent threat that MAGA presents and Trump presents to the democracy. And a key to this was, why did they never find this person? And so some people have done an analysis, former FBI agents, along with independent investigative reporters like Steve Baker, who's now assigned to the Blaze. And they did gate analysis and a range of other analysis. And Kyle Seraphin, who's a former FBI agent turned whistleblower, he had done initial analysis at the time of the house of a certain house location that was connected to the Capitol, the January 6th pipe bomber. What they have put together is they've put up a very credible allegation that it was one of the lead Capitol Police agents that day, one of the key Capitol Police officers, that in fact, not only is she the person they identify as the pipe bomber, but she's also identified that day, and this is fully known and not in dispute, she helped instigate the riot that day by shooting pepper balls into the crowd. That's what caused some portion of the crowd to get really agitated and move forward into the Capitol. She was the key person. She was one of the lead witnesses in all the cases against January 6th. She kept coming up magically at each key juncture to push this insurrection narrative. And it's undisputed, she now works at the CIA and has for quite some time. You kind of wonder, maybe she was always working at the CIA. I personally have not heard of a lot of Capitol Police to CIA resumes in my career. I have heard a lot of CIA undercover at some police force resumes. That's a lot more likely. So she appears to be the person identified by them. And these are longstanding FBI agents who are whistleblowers, longstanding independent investigative journalists who have excellent credibility. They put together gate analysis, house analysis, surveillance analysis, all points in her direction. And the question then is, why is she still at the CIA under Director Ratcliffe? Why hasn't Bongino and Patel disclosed who these people are and disclosed this case? Why haven't they indicted Brennan and Clapper and Comey on the big charges that Comey hasn't even been charged in yet?
Yeah, and why is that? Let's just stop right there for a second. Why has those folks not been brought up on any charges here, especially after months ago now, Tulsi Gabbard released all this classified information, especially on Clapper and some of these others, that it looks pretty straightforward that these classified documents show evidence of wrongdoing, yet no one's been charged. Why is that?
That is the big open question. And my view is because it's protection of MI6 and protection of Mossad as well as institutional actors at the CIA. That
Okay,
Ratcliffe,
but I mean, surely that would have been known before Tulsi released that information. So now that it's out there, they got to do some kind of action, doesn't he? Because if you just expose that these guys did something, especially somebody like Clapper, who I think's got probably a lot of dirt, and you don't do anything, then that undermines confidence even in the current administration.
completely. And you see it the same with Brennan. I mean, Brennan's implicated all the way back to 9/11. I mean, there's all kind. You name a scandal,
Yeah.
John Brennan shows up, illegally spying on the Senate, doing illegal torture in Guantanamo, helping the people get in to do 9/11 and then covering it up later. He was the Saudi guy in Saudi Arabia at the time. He just shows up, scandal. Here's a Brennan. Here's Brennan. Here's Brennan. Yeah. He's the deep state fix-it man. He's like being there from Peter Sellers, but deep state style. And so, given that, you're absolutely right. And if we're serious about any kind of accountability for deep state corruption, then Brennan and Clapper have got to get indicted. It's good that they got something on Bolton. It's good they got something on Comey, but they all need to be indicted together down in the Southern District of Florida, and it includes some of the private actors that were complicit in this. Bill Kristol was complicit in this. Norm Eisen was complicit in this. This was systematic, systemic lawfare. It was a running, ongoing change color revolution coup attempt against the elected president of the United States to sabotage and betray our foreign policy in a way that could potentially lead to World War III. So that's how consequential their corruption was. So there has to be actions. There has to be accountability. But we're seeing no evidence.
So what's your assessment as to why that hasn't happened? If anyone had motivation to indict them, it would be President Trump, and yet it hasn't happened. What is your explanation?
Kind of like what LBJ told Nixon when Nixon was going to throw LBJ under the bus for some things. And so he just went through with Nixon all the different crimes that would implicate Nixon along with him if he were to go that route. I think that's what's happened. I think the deep state has sent the message. You can do little cases, a little classified documents case on Bolton. You can do a little perjury case against Comey in a very favorable jurisdiction for Comey. But you're not going to go after anybody real or serious because this problem will happen or this thing will happen. That is the only reasonable takeaway I can have because they've been completely AWOL. There's no logical reason for them to have not already brought these prosecutions. When Biden was here, all the January 6th defendants were already criminal defendants and locked up. These guys are walking. I mean, they're scared to even perp walk them. They're scared to even publicly arrest them, including Letitia James. Still haven't done anything with Adam Schiff and his history of criminality, not only connected to this group, but it's because he commits other crimes because they can't help themselves, like mortgage fraud and the rest while they're at it. But I have completely lost confidence in anybody at the top of the FBI or DOJ to fix this. And if they're going to stay in power, they need to fix it by year's end. If there aren't meaningful indictments of the Comeys, the Clappers, the Brennans on the big issues, not these little nitpicky issues, then Bondi needs to be sacked, Blanche needs to be sacked, Patel needs to be sacked, and Bongino needs to be sacked because that's what they were brought in for. I mean, Kash Patel talked real big. He was going to take on these gangsters. He was going to make the FBI office the mausoleum of the deep state. And he said, it's outrageous that Christopher Wray would use the government plane for private purposes. And now he uses that plane 4 times more than Wray ever did to see his girlfriend over here, to see another go over here, another party over here. He even went apparently to something called Boondoggle Ranch. I got to know, I thought this had to be a meme, but it turns out it may be right. That's what a joke these people are. They don't have the cojones to take on the deep state. That's what we're seeing.
Well, that's not encouraging. One final question I'd like to ask in relation to January 6th, because there's obviously been a lot of information out that there was, I don't even know how many FBI agents were part of all this. And there's, you just mentioned a few, that there's some evidence that some were inciting this to try to get something to go on here. To what extent does that, let's just for the moment, just say that those things were true and that there was some incitement, and yet does that exculpate the people who were actually involved, the people who broke into the Capitol and violated and struck some of the Capitol Police, etc.? Does that say that they were not guilty, or is there multiple culpability?
It's like a color revolution that you need some degree of support from the audience you're trying to instigate, and so it doesn't exculpate anybody who did anything wrong that day. But it means they're the key culprits who are the real risk. because these were the infiltrators, informants, and instigators to try to create this environment for this to happen. They wanted the violence to escalate. And this doesn't even get to all the ones acting as disguised undercovers online in these message boards where they were saying, hey, why don't we kidnap congressmen? Why don't we hang Mike Pence? These ideas, I think, were coming from insiders, from informants, from infiltrators, from instigators, going back to COINTELPRO, right? It's like the way the people that assassinated Malcolm X are not off the hook for doing so. But when you dig in and you realize it was really a Fed operation all along, it makes the Fed the greater risk to the constitutional republic.
So again, that I would ask, if that's the case, nobody has a higher incentive to bring these people to justice than President Trump himself. And yet that still hasn't happened despite all this evidence out there. Why will he not require these people to take action here as opposed to just letting it smolder?
He's been told that if anything he says publicly will be used against the prosecutions as selective prosecution, so that he's been told to not say things publicly about it beyond very generic statements. I think they're misleading him in that regard. But putting that aside, what it shows is that for whatever reason, the key people at the FBI and Justice Department are the ones stopping and blocking all of this. And they have convinced the president that he can't do anything about it. The only reason why Comey got indicted is he complained. He accidentally sent a message he planned to send privately to Pam Bondi. He posted it on Truth by accident. And that's what all of a sudden forced her to actually go and make sure the statute of limitations didn't expire. And a lot of these January 6th indictments, statute of limitations is up in about 8 weeks. They're up January 5th, January 6th, January 7th. It's gone. And then they can never be indicted. So I think they're just running out the clock. And then you've got saboteurs in all of these departments, all kinds of Eastern District of Virginia, Southern District of New York, Southern District of Florida. You only hear news of it when they're fired or they suddenly resign. But you have leading prosecutors, leading FBI agents who are complicit in this. So are they going to investigate their own corruption? Are they going to investigate their own fraud? That's why some of us told people you had to clean house. You had to fire everybody and then go back through a new rehiring process. They didn't do that. So they got saboteurs everywhere. And consequently, their ability to get anything done is significantly hamstrung. So unless they take meaningful institutional reform, they're not going to be able to even get these high-profile criminals who are involved in a Fedsurrection, not an insurrection, held accountable. And that means we're at risk for it happening again and again in the future.
Well, and that's kind of what my concern is, because if a disruptor like Donald Trump, who has not been afraid to break norms, is not willing to use the power that he has to compel compliance on some of these things. I mean, somebody like his predecessor, Joe Biden, who's like lives in this kind of world and has done everything he can to keep that stuff silent. Whoever's going to follow on, who else is going to do any of these things? And will we ever get any kind of justice or reform in our country?
Exactly. If we don't get it now, when are we going to get it? And that's the deep concern. But I think overarching, the demand for radical reform and revolution is not going anywhere. They can, suppress it, censor it, deny it, try to do everything like Europe is doing, try to keep the AfD off the ballot, try to take the Romanian presidential candidate off the ballot, fix and rig the election in Moldova. All they're doing is buying time. The empire is collapsing in live time, and their crimes are getting exposed more and more just by the common sense of the ordinary person. So it would be the best if Trump were the one. It would be the best for these establishment figures. Let Trump transition us out of a dying, decaying empire to bring down these corrupt institutions, because these people think that by stopping that from happening, they protect themselves. They short-term buy themselves time, but long-term, they buy themselves V for vendetta level revolt. And that's what they're going to get. And by golly, they're going to deserve it when it comes.
Yeah, I guess we're going to have to wait and see how that comes. And especially with this Epstein file and all the potentially really explosive things that could be in there. We'll see what happens when that happens, because it doesn't look like they're going to be able to keep the lid on this thing for much longer. But really appreciate you coming on and casting some real light on some of these things. We really appreciate it today. Always happy to be here. Thank you very much. And we also appreciate you guys. Also, we have yet another show coming up in about 10 minutes where we are going to have Mad Max Russians, what to make of their new tactics. We're going to have Stanislav Krapivnik. You're going to really enjoy this. First time we've had him on our show. A lot of you are familiar with his work. Do not miss that. We will see you at 2 p.m. on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.